first thing is that the tax to GDP has gone up. Now, it doesn't show up like that in the budget numbers. 10.8, 10.9% for FY22 RE, but that's because they've been excessively conservative, right? So if you see the numbers till December, and January GST collection on December activity was even stronger. So the 9-month growth is 44% in gross taxes at the center. So anyway, that included base years, etc. So, but the October to December, which was relatively more normal, was up 21% year on year. They've assumed a 15% decline in the March quarter year on year. Right? That's ridiculous. I mean, corporate taxes, most people would have felt conservative in December because Omicron was just coming. It was, who knows, we will pay it in March if needed, right? And well, now they're going to pay a lot because the economy has kept bouncing back. Yeah. And so the taxes that they're assuming are a lot lower. So if you adjust for it, there is 1% increase in tax to GDP. The second thing is that the anchor around central deficit used to be 3.5%. Now it is 6.5%. So there is a 3% extra space now whether the bond market is ready to absorb it or not is a different question. But the fact is that we're anchored to that. The government has anchored to that, and they've bought themselves space by saying FY26 will do 4.5, right? So that's going to keep happening. The states which were at 2.6, 2.7% are now allowed to do 4%. So there is 1% plus 3% plus 1%, right? So there is 5% of extra space. Then your interest costs have gone up by about 0.6, 0.7% because your debt to GDP has gone up. So there is some extra expenditure that is going just on interest. On top of that, your salary, pension, some of the other mandatory spend has to keep going up. So your nominal GDP is about 1 year behind, right? As per consensus, about 10% lower. Now, so what that means is that there is about another % or so, which has expenditure to GDP has gone up visibly because the nominal GDP is lower. Now, if you adjust for that, there is suddenly almost 2.5%. So if you say take 1.5% here and take 1% of higher interest, there is 2.5% of extra space that you are left with spending. Now, in the pandemic years, this was taken up by food subsidy, this was taken up by vaccines, this was taken up by emergency medical spending, this and that. But now what, right? So a lot of that expenditure is rolling off. So now either the government just gives up and says that, look, we wanted because we were unsure of what $90 oil will do to the economy, and therefore we are assuming lower growth, or that global growth will slow and there could be a problem, or that we don't understand why tax to GDP has gone up, so we have to assume that tax to GDP will fall next year. How much of it was one-off, so or informal sector gaining back share against the formal sector as the economy opens up, all those kind of variables. But either way, if the state and central governments are sitting on 5.5 lakh crores of cash, yeah, right, and that number, given the pace of expenditure and the pace at which taxes are gushing in, it could very well be higher in the next 6 months. At some point, the government has to, the government, state and center, have to decide, and it will be the center because the center controls the state's borrowing, that they say, okay, enough is enough. We can't spend so much. So we are going to now bring down our borrowing targets, because you look at the funding of this year's deficit, right? 1.74 lakh crores is use of cash. So this was cash that they were left with last year, right? So if you remember that fiscal surprise, that my God, 6.5 has gone to 9, boss, that was FCI borrowing, which is now being done by the government. Yeah. And there was 0.9% of GDP, which was just the government didn't know what to do with it. But they thought, let's keep the cash. God knows what will happen in the future. Now, at some point, this charade has to stop.
Yeah. No, absolutely. So two counterfactuals there. One, if there is money that the government has access to, could you have kept some of the spending on revenue items, like say food subsidies higher? Could you have allocated more to Manrega? Why would you not make that choice?
Yeah. So See, Manrega. I mean, not that. I mean, I know you use Manrega as an example, but Manrega is a demand-driven scheme. So if people demand work, and what you can do is you can raise the rates. Right, 180 was taken to 200.
Exactly.
Yeah, you could have raised the rates, but then there are other issues with that. So if you meaning the return of workers to construction sites, etc. So those are things that start getting affected. But either way, Narega is a demand-driven scheme. So as the demand comes in, maybe they will put more in the supplementary grants like they did last year. Right? So that should happen. Why is there no sort of compensation for, or other, so as the grain subsidy ends in March, could it not have been extended by 6 months? And I think that's a fair question. That till the time that you get full evidence that people have come back. I think it is, but I think the government's assumption there could have been, and I have no idea why that was decided, but that the economy is now finally opening up, right? So yeah, the schools have started, right? Now the point is, but jokes aside, I think that means that there are, the low ticket fee school teachers, the auto walas driving them to work. There's a whole ecosystem around it, right? So then suddenly there's a need for domestic help. There is, as offices start, office boys, receptionists, so lots of jobs start getting normalized. Like, the pan shop wala below our office has had very little business for the last 1.5 years. And I think that normalization is something that the government may also be relying on, that as the Omicron wave fades, and the economy then opens up for good, then perhaps the need for that will not be there. And the good thing is that they have the fiscal space. So if in June they decide it so turns out that the economy is not bouncing back, then they have room to spend on the fiscal side. What is actually quite remarkable is that with the state elections on the horizon, that the government chose to stay disciplined with expenditure.